Anthony Edwards has showcased that he is a first-team All-NBA talent through fourth quarter takeovers, through offensive outbursts, and defensive assignments. He's been nothing short of amazing. Rudy Gobert has proven yet again that he is immensely talented at the rim as a rim protector and a lob threat, as well as his ability to improve on the perimeter defense. Naz Reid, Karl Anthony Towns, Jaden McDaniels, Kyle Anderson, and Mike Conley have all proven as well to be more than a competent supporting cast. Last year as the 8th seed, they lost in a gentleman's sweep to the Denver Nuggets. While Anthony Edwards did have an amazing performance in that Game 4, leading them to avoid a sweep and as their only victory in the playoffs, this year is much different. Numbers aside, the Minnesota Timberwolves are great. It's not a roster on paper that you look at and immediately think they're a championship contender. However, they're changing the way and the landscape that basketball is being played. Anthony Edwards, as mentioned, has been a dominant superstar on seemingly both sides of the ball. Mike Conley was such an underrated acquisition that was acquired at the deadline last season. Swapping him out for D'Angelo Russell has proved to be an integral decision. His ability to play defense paired with his high IQ facilitation skills are perfect for the young guard Anthony Edwards who's stepping into stardom. I really have enjoyed what I've seen so far from Mike, especially compared to D'Angelo Russell, as D'Lo, yes, has boasted numbers of 6, sometimes even 7 assists a night. However, with Mike, there's much more meaning behind the ability for him to pass, and we've seen that a lot in his stints recently, whether that was Utah, whether that was Memphis. He really seems like such an ideal plug-and-play type of NBA player, and he's made me a fan season after season. I think the big question for this Minnesota Timberwolves team would be the Twin Towers dilemma that they're having with Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns. A lot of people have been very critical about Karl Anthony Towns this season, as his production, you can see on the screen right now, has been somewhat lacking compared to his past seasons. However, to give him the benefit of the doubt, Chris Finch even said it himself, he's not entirely used to playing the 4 position, especially next to someone who can't shoot like Rudy Gobert. From what I've seen, this team poses difficult matchups for opposing rosters. When we first saw the Boston Celtics play them the other week, we saw the Celtics start that game opting to go big. They put out Al Horford and Kristaps Porzingis for the first time we've seen all season, and this is the luxury that some teams don't even have the option to do. As we see, NBA rosters tend to get smaller and smaller. Since the year, I want to say 2017, 2018, I feel like they've been getting smaller. It wasn't until last year when the Jokic-led Nuggets won the championship and, the 76ers with Embiid. The era of big men is slowly coming back. The Celtics made this a difficult game for the Timberwolves, as Jaden McDaniel and Rudy Gobert aren't the greatest outside shooters. Obviously, Jaden has shown his ability to knock down three-pointers, but that night he was definitely struggling and not producing, as well as you would want a 3-and-D player like him too. And that's not to say Jaden McDaniels isn't talented. Jaden's easily a top 10. Some people would probably argue top 5, depending on who you ask, perimeter defender in the NBA, which is why this team is so deadly. Through Anthony Edwards scoring, through Mike Conley's facilitating, through Kyle Anderson's production and Naz Reid's production bursts off the bench, this team just looks scary. They have the triple-headed crown, the triple-headed snake, whatever you want to call it, of big men. Naz Reid's role on this team is so integral, not only as a defender and a rebounder, but just a locker room energy and an absolute dog off the bench, not only offensively, but defensively. I think a lot of people are aware Anthony Edwards' real skill, but they're not ready to admit he's a top 5 or a top 3 shooting guard in the NBA. To me, it's a pretty short list. Anthony Edwards, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and Devin Booker are the best. The shooting guards, I'm not going to say best in the NBA, but probably without a doubt. It's long ago are the days that DeMar DeRozan, Klay Thompson, James Harden, those guys owned this league. The Denver Nuggets don't just disappear, obviously. They're the favorites out west, and not much has changed. Obviously, they lost Bruce Brown. However, you got guys like Peyton Watson and Christian Brown making much more of an impact this season off the bench. They also did lose Jeff Green to the Rockets, I might add. However, a team like the Mavericks reminds me of what we talk about today with the Timberwolves. They're just changing the landscape of the NBA, and it seems to be working every single year. Something different is taking over the NBA. Other teams have seen the success that a big men-led team can have. Obviously, the Timberwolves are led through Anthony Edwards, but the Rudy Gobert and Karl-Anthony Towns experience poses such an interesting concept to the NBA. And since we saw the Nuggets win with a big man-led roster, we're seeing it's possible. Like I said though, Karl-Anthony Towns has been struggling, but they're still the 3rd seed in the Western Conference even with his struggles. If you can continue to shoot the 3-point at a high clip, like he's shown in the past he's been able to, there's a lot of bright spots for this roster, especially out west when you think of like playoff scenarios. They really match up great with all the other contenders. You'd probably argue the Nuggets are the best matchup, but outside of that, the Lakers, the Suns, the Clippers, those are the matchups you're likely to see out west. Maybe the Rockets this year, it's funny to even say that, or the Pelicans. None of those teams really match up. I just named them, and none of them, like I said, aside from the Nuggets with Aaron Gordon and Nikola Jokic, match up with this Twin Towers scheme that the Timberwolves are running. Obviously, the Lakers have AD, and then they have Vando that could be useful, but we saw the Nuggets kind of just completely dismiss that last year in the playoffs in the Western Conference Finals. Now, obviously, Jokic is much more versatile than Rudy and Karl. He possesses the ability to pass and shoot at such a high rate. But when you look at the Nuggets guarding the Timberwolves, I would just assume Jokic is on Gobert, and then Gordon, who's strong and has the length and quickness and agility to keep up with Cat, can keep up with Cat's swiftness and shooting ability. However, outside of that, I see no real hope for teams out west stopping them, especially if Anthony Edwards plays at this rate. It's really remarkable how much 1 year of chemistry can do for a team. Obviously, we saw this team somewhat thrown together at the deadline, and then in the playoffs, they had a huge fight with Kyle Anderson and Rudy Gobert, and not to mention McDaniels breaking his hand in the locker room, which kind of caused the play-in and the beginning of the playoffs to be just riddled with difficulty and injury, because there's this awkward feeling with Rudy on the court, and then Naz Reid is hurt as well. However, Chris Finch just kind of brings the attitude to this team as a head coach, an excellent head coach might I add. It just brings this attitude of no nonsense, that we're all men, we're all adults, we're all here to work and win. Sometimes you need to separate to build. Sometimes you need friction to promote growth. And with this Timberwolves team, it's more than clear that was the case. They honestly kind of remind me of the Mavericks. Many people were willing to quit on the Mavericks last season because everything was so new and everything was so fresh. With the Timberwolves in comparison, people just wanted to quit on Rudy Gobert and Karl-Anthony Towns, saying that the haul they gave up for Rudy was the biggest, fleece of all time from Utah. To me, it seems like a win-win. Now we're seeing it's a viable option for Karl and Rudy to play together, and Karl isn't even playing that great. The consensus with me on this entire topic, guys, is as long as they stay healthy, I can't really put a finger on a team that is going to perform better out west. Remarkably deep outside of the Nuggets or maybe the Mavericks. Karl-Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert, I feel like they've gotten to a point in their careers where they're underrated and so overhated. The Rudy Gobert and Karl-Anthony Towns slander agenda is one of the most precise I've seen in the NBA. The truth is, though, they're just so opposite and they complement each other so well. As Rudy is 7 foot and has no offensive bag whatsoever, but is a good vertical lob threat, and then Karl-Anthony Towns does everything Rudy can't do, as he's not a great defender, not a great vertical lob threat, but he can shoot the ball at 40% from 3 and can put it on the ground and dribble and move around and actually has an offensive bag. It's really interesting that they're polar opposites. Rudy can't shoot, like I said. The one problem, though, or the biggest problem, I guess I'd say, with Karl this season is that I don't see much aggression from him. I don't see him ripping through defenders, bodying up smaller guards, and just using his size. The other night against Boston, I was seeing a lot of Jaylen Brown and Drew Holiday kind of switching onto him and posing stops and turnovers. Obviously, Drew and Jaylen are tremendously talented athletes. However, in the past, this has never stopped Karl. All in all, I just believe Anthony Edwards has more of the dog in him than people really realize. It's his time, and he's shown it time and time again that he can trash the talk and back it up. The playoffs last year made me excited to see what they're going to do this year. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say that I thought they were going to be as great as they were, like a top 4 seed. I feel like I might have said they could be a top 6 seed, but that's neither here nor there. Anthony can just, on the surface, drop in 40 points on pretty much any given night, and he's kind of taking that energy to every single game this season. He's not only the best offensive player on the court, but he's challenging the enemy team's best defensive player on the court. It's really an exciting time, guys, where we're at in the NBA. Basketball is just, there's little to no parity in the NBA right now, and it seems like super teams are failing. There's just a brand new structure every year in the NBA where a superstar by, a lot of other, all-star talented, or not even all-star, but just good NBA players can be great. Like, you look at the 76ers right now, Joel Embiid is the superstar. Then you have a guy like Tyrese Maxey, Tobias Harris, DeAnthony Melton, Paul Reed. A lot of these guys are just, good, great NBA players that make a team. I mean, that seems to be the formula right now. The Denver Nuggets just won it with that formula. Miami Heat made the championship with that formula out east. Sorry, I'm rambling at this point. Out east, as the 8th seed. This is also interesting to me. Do the Timberwolves stand a chance in the West? Who's capable of beating them? Let me know in the comments below if you made it this far. I appreciate your support as always. Have a great rest of your day. Stay happy, healthy, and blessed. Peace.